The bat shouldn't have gone there. Not to that dugout. Not to that manager. Not on a night when the Dodgers had just lost. Not when the scoreboard told a story that nobody in Los Angeles wanted to read. Not when Dave Roberts was somewhere in that stadium trying to find answers that the game refused to give him. But Shohei Ohtani picked up that bat anyway. His 21st home run bat. The one that had just sent a ball into the seats earlier that evening. The one that represented something personal, something earned, something that belongs in a display case or a personal collection or a quiet corner of a championship memory. He picked it up. He walked across the field. And he handed it to Torey Lovullo. The Arizona Diamondbacks manager stood there and didn't move for what felt like a very long time. His mouth opened slightly. His eyes dropped to the bat in his hands and then came back up to Ohtani's face as if he was trying to confirm that this was actually happening. That this wasn't a misunderstanding. That the greatest baseball player on the planet had just handed him a piece of history on a night that belonged to Arizona. Lovullo would later sit in front of a press conference microphone and try to explain what that moment felt like. He couldn't find the words. And honestly, neither could anyone else. The game itself had been the kind of loss that sits differently than other losses. Not a blowout. Not a humiliation. Not the kind of game where you shake your head and move on quickly. It was the kind of loss that makes you replay specific moments over and over. Where you identify the exact pitch, the exact decision, the exact second where everything turned. The Dodgers had fought. They had competed. They had put themselves in positions to win. But the Diamondbacks had been sharper in the moments that mattered. Cleaner in the innings that decided things. And when the final out was recorded, the scoreboard told a story that the Dodgers didn't want to believe but couldn't argue with. They had lost. And Ohtani had still hit his 21st home run of the season. Let that sit for a moment. Because it matters. Because in a game his team lost, in a night that ended in frustration, Shohei Ohtani had still managed to do something that only a handful of players in the history of baseball do in an entire season. His 21st home run. Before summer. In a loss. As if the scoreboard was almost secondary to what he was personally accomplishing at the plate game after game after game. But the home run wasn't the story of the night. The bat was. Nobody in the Dodgers clubhouse could explain exactly when Ohtani made the decision. Whether it was during the game, after the final out, in the quiet of the dugout while the Diamondbacks celebrated on the field. Nobody could point to a specific moment and say, that's when he decided. But somewhere in the aftermath of that loss, Shohei Ohtani made a choice that had nothing to do with scorecards or statistics or the standings in the National League West. He made a human choice. A reporter who was positioned near the field in the post-game period described what they witnessed. Ohtani emerged from the Dodgers dugout holding his bat. Not his game bat casually tossed into a bag. His 21st home run bat, specifically. The one that had made the crowd stand up earlier that evening. He walked with purpose. Not quickly, not dramatically. Just steadily. Like someone who had made up their mind and wasn't second-guessing it. He crossed to the Arizona side. And he found Torey Lovullo. What was said between them in those initial seconds was private. Too quiet for the cameras to capture. Too personal for the surrounding noise to penetrate. But the body language told everything. Ohtani extending the bat. Lovullo's hands coming up slowly, almost hesitantly, as if accepting something he wasn't sure he deserved to hold. Then Ohtani said something. And Lovullo's expression shifted completely. Later, when pressed about what exactly Ohtani said in that moment, Lovullo would pause for a long time before answering. He said he's never seen anything like this in MLB. The room wasn't sure what to do with that. Neither was Lovullo, who repeated it almost as if saying it out loud a second time would help him understand it better. Those were his words. Not mine. The press conference that followed was unlike anything the Arizona Diamondbacks had hosted in recent memory. Not because of what was said. But because of what couldn't be said. Because of the moments where Torey Lovullo, a man who had managed baseball games at the highest level for years, a man who had seen thousands of innings and hundreds of opposing players, simply ran out of language. He entered the room still holding the bat. Not as a prop. Not as something to show off. He was holding it the way you hold something when you're not quite ready to put it down. When putting it down feels like it might make the moment less real. A reporter noticed immediately. "Torii, is that Ohtani's bat?" Lovello looked down at it as if he had momentarily forgotten it was there. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Yeah, it is." Another reporter followed up, "Can you walk us through what happened? How did that come about?" Lovello set the bat down carefully on the table in front of him. He straightened up. He looked at the assembled reporters. And for a moment, he didn't say anything at all. The silence stretched long enough that someone in the back of the room shifted uncomfortably. Then Lovello exhaled. "I've been in this game for a long time," he began. His voice was slower than usual. More deliberate. Like each word was being selected carefully. "I've competed against great players. I've seen generational talent. I've been on the field when history was made. And I thought I understood what it meant to face greatness." He stopped. "And then Shohei Ohtani hands you his home run bat after you beat him. After his team lost. And he looks at you and says he's never seen anything like this in MLB. He shook his head slowly. And you realize you don't understand anything at all." The room was completely still. "He wasn't talking about the game," Lovello continued. "He wasn't talking about his home run or our pitching or any specific play. He was talking about something bigger than all of that. About what baseball gives you that nothing else can. About moments. About the kind of moments that don't show up in box scores but stay with you forever." Lovello reached out and touched the bat briefly with his fingertips. "I don't know what I'm going to do with this. I genuinely don't know. But I know I'm never getting rid of it." When the reporters turned the conversation back to the game itself, Lovello answered the tactical questions with his usual precision. He talked about his pitching staff. About the adjustments his hitters made. About specific at-bats that turned the game. He was professional and thorough. But every few minutes, his eyes would drift back to the bat on the table. And each time they did, something in his expression changed. The manager disappeared briefly, and in his place was just a man sitting with an extraordinary object trying to make sense of an extraordinary night. A reporter asked him directly, "Did it surprise you that Ohtani did that? Given that his team lost?" Lovello considered the question carefully. "That's exactly what surprised me most," he said. "Because in competitive sports, you don't expect that. You expect people to process their losses privately. To keep their emotions inside. To save the gestures for wins." He leaned forward slightly. "But Ohtani doesn't operate like that. He doesn't see the game the way most people see it. He sees something in baseball that goes beyond winning and losing on a particular night." He paused. "And when he said he'd never seen anything like this in MLB, I think that's what he meant. Not a play. Not a moment. The whole thing. What baseball can be when it's at its best. The respect between competitors. The acknowledgement that on any given night, someone plays better than you, and that's not a failure. That's the game." Inside the Dodgers clubhouse, the mood was what you'd expect after a loss. Quiet. Focused. The kind of silence that comes from professionals processing defeat without letting it become something larger than it needs to be. Ohtani dressed without much fanfare. When a reporter finally got a moment with him and asked about giving the bat to Lovello, his answer was characteristically simple. "They played well tonight," he said. "They deserved something to remember." "But it was your 21st home run bat," the reporter pressed. "That's a significant milestone." Ohtani was quiet for a moment. "The home run is already in the record books," he said finally. "The bat is just wood. What you do with wood matters more than the wood itself." He pulled his jacket on. "And tonight, giving it to Torii felt right. I don't know how else to explain it. It just felt like the right thing to do." Later, When the stadium had emptied and the lights had dimmed and the grounds crew moved silently across the field, someone asked a veteran baseball writer covering the game what they thought the gesture meant. The writer thought about it for a long time. Baseball has 1,000 rules, they said eventually. Rules about how to play, when to run, where to stand, what counts as a strike. But there are no rules about what to do with your home run bat after your team loses. They paused. Ohtani made up his own rule tonight. And I think it might be the best rule baseball has ever seen. Torey Lovullo took that bat home. He didn't put it in his office immediately. He didn't display it right away. According to someone close to the Arizona organization, it sat in his car for 2 days while he figured out what to do with it. While he figured out how to honor it properly. Because some things in baseball are too big for a trophy case. Some things need a moment to breathe before you know where they belong. And somewhere in Arizona, a manager who had just beaten Shohei Ohtani was sitting with a piece of wood that felt heavier than any win. Because Ohtani had looked him in the eye and said 5 words that neither of them would forget. I've never seen anything like this. Neither had the rest of us. Neither had the rest of us.